Happy Monday to you, Central Georgia. Thanks for tuning in here on 13 WMAZ Plus for a look at your extended forecast. There's not too much to write home about with the weather as we go throughout the work week, but we do have some things to break down, and we'll start it out by recapping the 5-day rainfall totals. So this is going back into the end of last week, kind of before we really started kicking off maybe a bit of a dreary stretch, at the very least a pretty gloomy stretch of weather, especially for our easternmost counties. So here's a look at some of the totals of rain. Down in Eastman, just shy of an inch. In some isolated areas in southern Telfair County, just over an inch of rain. Pockets of over 2 inches of rain across Dooley County, stretching back into Pulaski County as well. 1.5 inches of rain in portions of Lawrence County, down into southern Treutlen County around Soperton. Just shy of 3 inches of rain, which is the highest total that I could find on one of the pixels. That's over in East Lawrence County, right on the Johnson County line. 1.3 inches of rain in Centerville. 0.2 inches of rain up here in Macon, and then just 1/10 of an inch of rain up in Milledgeville. But you can see that areas over to the east, they got some higher rainfall totals than we did here in Central Georgia, closer to Statesboro and Sylvania, close to 3 inches of rain and a pocket of 4 inches of rain in northwestern Bullitt County. So that was the theme. That coastal low that we had developed, it rode up the Atlantic coast. Areas closer to the center of circulation with that had a bit more moisture in the forecast, and along with that, some cloudier skies and some rainy weather. But overall, throughout the entire weekend, some areas didn't luck out with any rain, and Middle Georgia Regional Airport was one of those places. You can now see that we're hovering in the dry category for the month of October because we haven't had anything in the way of rain besides maybe a minuscule trace of rain, which is just a few drops of rain that aren't even high enough to record 1/100th of an inch of rain. So your total still remains the same, just shy of a half inch of rain so far in the month of October. On average, we typically don't see too much rain in the month of October, just over 2¼ of an inch of rain, and it doesn't look like we're on pace anywhere to start to flirt with that record set back in 1959 of 9.39 inches. So as of last Thursday, if you missed it, we did get an update to our drought monitor. Not too many changes that we saw. Our south and southeastern counties were in a moderate drought as of 2 weeks ago. So the drought monitor before last week's that got released, but we now do see patches of a severe drought getting really close to Cordele and areas in Crisp County, pretty close to the Lake Blackshear area. And we also do see some pockets of a moderate drought expanded over into the westernmost corner of Upson County. Along with that, a moderate drought has stretched a little bit farther to the east. But still, most areas here in Central Georgia find themselves like Macon, Warner Robins, Perry, Milledgeville, and all these areas outlined in this yellow color. And just simply some abnormally dry conditions, which is nothing to really write home about, but it can lead to the expansion into some drought conditions like the moderate and severe drought that you see that are just 1 or 2 categories above abnormally dry conditions. And with not too much rain, obviously some areas got some pockets of rain over the last 5 days. Anything that we got in the way of rain, still not impressive enough in order to alleviate these dry conditions. We're very likely looking at, by the next issuing of this drought monitor, that we will see a lot of these drought conditions worsen all over Central Georgia. But we do have a sign of maybe some widespread rain in your forecast. It's going to come at the very, very end of your 7-day forecast. Until then, we are kicking off a dry stretch today. Cool mornings and some great and pleasant feeling afternoons are going to be in store each and every day because the humidity will remain low. And when you have low humidity, obviously you don't have a lot of moisture in the air, so your rain chances are going to be a lot lesser. But it also will help the actual high temperatures each and every day feel very accurate of what they actually read. So here's a walk around the quad across Central Georgia, downtown Dublin, downtown Macon, and Warner Robins. Plenty of blue sky, maybe a few spotty clouds here and there. And then, of course, the Georgia National Fairgrounds, which is quite a different image than we have been seeing on the quad view as of the last week, maybe week and a half. The fair did come to a conclusion yesterday, and we actually just got some of the totals in. Over 600,000 people visited the Georgia National Fair this year. That is an uptick of about 8% of the previous record of attendees set back in 2019. So it was a record-breaking year for the Georgia National Fair, and just as quick as it went up, you can see that it is continuing to be broken down. Still a good sign of many vendors right now, but it does look like more folks are out there now that the temperatures are a tad bit warmer than they were in the overnight hours, and people are continuing to break down everything in terms of the vendors, in terms of the rides, in terms of the carnival games. I do imagine this fun downslide will be one of the last things left there. Typically, it is one of the first things to be put up, and we'll probably see that to be one of the last things to be taken down. But it actually looks like there's a crew right there that may be working to break that down as of right now. So it will be very quick to see all of the fun sights at the fair leave over the next couple of days. But taking a look at your temperatures, the big story this morning was some of the coolest temperatures that we have seen as of recently. In Macon specifically, I believe we hopped down to 48 or 49 degrees this morning. We'll take a look at the almanac later on this afternoon to see what value is specifically confirmed, but giving you an idea about where we started at. So we've seen nearly a 20-degree temperature increase already since the early morning hours. Americus is the only value still left in the upper 60s. 73 is the warmest number down in Vidalia, but the rest of central Georgia hovering at 70, 71, or 72 degrees this morning. Here's a look at your current temperatures across the eastern United States, and you can see obviously down towards the south, some warmer values in the upper 70s like Panama City and Orlando at 78 and 77 degrees respectively. 79 in New Orleans, 79 in Houston, but Laredo, Texas gets the warmest temperature value that we do see here at the 11 a.m. hour. But everyone here in the eastern United States, these numbers are a good bit lower, maybe a couple degrees lower than what we have been typically seeing. New Orleans has been at that 84-degree mark very consistently just about each and every day. So it looks like areas along the Gulf Coast are finally starting to get a bit of a downtick in the humidity as we're transitioning into the midway point of October this week. So obviously fall is going to be in full swing very shortly. So now taking a look at just some of the wind arrows that you see over to the east. We were talking about that coastal low, and what actually happened over the course of this weekend, two separate low pressure systems did establish themselves. Obviously, the more profound one is going to be up here near Virginia Beach and Washington. That's going to be where there's more widespread rain still in the forecast. But another one established itself down to the southwest of that nor'easter that you probably heard a lot of the Weather Channel, maybe some network television talking about, that's bringing lots and lots of rain along the mid-Atlantic coast of the United States. But this low pressure center right here, where you can start to see that center of circulation, that moved on shore into portions of South Carolina, and we were on the westernmost periphery of that low pressure center. But now that's continuing to move back out into the Atlantic Ocean, not going to have any more implications in our forecast, but you can see your fair share of cooler temperatures along areas of the Atlantic coast of the United States like Washington, Virginia Beach, and Charleston that are sitting in the low to mid 60s here today. Now let's take a look at your dew point temperatures. We've gotten a bit of an increase, and we typically see that just about each and every day. Your dew point temperatures are typically lowest in the morning when your actual temperatures are dipping down. But now that your actual temperatures are up into the 70s, we have seen an increase to where we maybe have a widespread light green shade, but overall it's not substantially humid air by any means. Dew point temperatures in the upper 50s, low 60s, maybe the mid 60s if you're in Dublin. That's still not enough humidity to really sprout anything other than possibly a scattered sprinkle, but you're going to start to need some dew point temperatures in the upper 60s to low 70s in order to have some better rain chances. So over to the east, that's where your more humid air does lie, but it's good dividing ground all across the southeast corner of the United States, where we're seeing areas of no color and some areas of that faint light green color. We'll continue to watch that fluctuate over the next couple of days, but overall it is still a very dry atmosphere, and that will be a theme throughout your 7-day forecast. Winds and wind gusts, not as breezy as it was, say, on Friday or Saturday. We've had our fair share of windy days very recently, so it's very nice to see a bit of a change here. You do see some areas of that blue shade, maybe some sustained winds up to 7 or 8 miles per hour, but overall it is relatively calm in the way of winds. Not necessarily giving you that fall feel as you head into the afternoons, but with as low as our temperatures got this morning, we're very thankful that we didn't have a breeze, because that would have made for maybe even some wind chill values below what the actual temperatures were. So hour by hour, what can you expect with your temperatures? We'll continue to see them rise up into the upper 70s by the time we go just past lunchtime. And this meteogram right here peaking at 80 degrees in that warmest window of the afternoon, 3, 4, and 5 o'clock, before we finally start to see those numbers return back down into the 70s as we go closer to dinner time. So once again, the evenings are going to feel very, very nice and very fall-like. And of course, once you get well past sunset, that's where it's going to start to have a bit more of a chill in the air. So taking a look at the numbers from yesterday, 55 is what we started out with in downtown Macon. That's right on average for where we should be at this time of year. Obviously, your average low going into the mid-50s at 55 degrees just tells the story that, yes, the 50s are going to become more and more prominent as we go into the fall season. 82 for a high temperature, so slightly above average, but still not too bad whatsoever when you pair it up with that lower humidity. 93 was the record for yesterday back in 2017 and in 2000. 37 degrees for a record. I don't think I've seen a number get below the 40-degree mark for these record lows as of recently. So obviously very thankful that we're not talking about some upper 30s so far. Even the 40s seem a bit premature, but we did have a select few areas get down to that as of yesterday. So now let's take a look at your precipitation. No rain yesterday. Your departure of rain now down to just under 3 1/4 of an inch above where we should be. So we continue to see the positive number right there. You would be correct in saying that the calendar year of 2025 has been a relatively wet year, but overall over the last month and a half, September and October specifically, rain has been very hard to come by. So yes, we have received a good cushion in months, say like August, that we were well above average, and it put that number that your departure still well above average. But we've continued to see that number virtually cut in half. At one point, it was upwards to about 7 inches above where we should be. And now that's not what we're seeing whatsoever. It has been a very dry stretch as of recently. Sunrise 7:37 yesterday, and your sunset was at 7:05. So continuing to creep closer and closer to that last 7 p.m. sunset. I believe that will be on Wednesday, and then we'll start to see a 7:01 p.m. sunset on Wednesday down to 6:59 on Thursday. And yes, the sunset will continue to get well earlier throughout the next couple of months. Here's a look at the today graphic. Chilly start, transitioning into a dry and sunny afternoon. Not much besides maybe an occasional easterly breeze around 5 miles per hour, but 81 for a high temperature. So obviously when you compare that to average, you would be correct in saying that this afternoon is going to be a bit on the warmer side, although this 81 will continue to be paired up with some drier air in your forecast as opposed to those muggy conditions that could make it, say, feel like 84 or 85 degrees, but nowhere near the 90s, and that's the most important thing. 80s can be classified as warm, but we're barely above that 80-degree mark and will, in fact, stay in the low 80s for the foreseeable future. Satellite and radar picture, all is clear, maybe some cloud cover over towards the east, and that still makes sense. You're more humid areas and you're closer to that center of low pressure over towards the east. So we could see some passing clouds in our easternmost counties throughout today. Overall, we're just not looking at many big scale weather systems to impact us over the next couple of days. So you can get a really good image of that circulation just off the Atlantic coast of South and North Carolina. Once again, that's the much less defined center of low pressure that kind of separated itself from the nor'easter, which continues to move up the Atlantic coast. So what's in store in the way of rain throughout today? And in fact, we'll just go all the way through Tuesday and Wednesday just to show you that there will be some passing cloud cover here and there. Overall, doesn't look like anything in the way of rain. In fact, Tuesday should be one of those crystal clear afternoons with that deep blue color in the sky. Maybe a few very tiny clouds that are scattered about the sky like we currently saw on the quad view. But overall, we're picking at straws when it comes to talking about anything for your short-term forecast. This goes all the way to Wednesday morning, a nice and clear start. So once again, when we don't have too many clouds in the morning hours, that's going to result in some cooler temperatures. But I think today is definitely going to be the day that we had some of the lowest numbers in the forecast. We'll see a gradual warming trend day by day as we go into Tuesday and Wednesday. Nothing really in the way of cloud cover on Wednesday. It's a very quiet forecast for future view. And typically we always talk about your football forecast as we go into Friday and preview the weekend ahead. Well, we actually have one tonight. If you have any plans, maybe you're off work, maybe the kids are off school today, taking a trip up I-75. The Atlanta Falcons, one of the biggest games that they've had as of recently, squaring off against the Buffalo Bills, part of a Monday Night Football doubleheader. Mercedes-Benz Stadium, the roof will be open tonight, and I do not blame them because take a look at this forecast. Very fall-like, maybe a few clouds in the sky, but at the warmest, your temperatures will be in the upper 70s, maybe closer to the 80-degree mark, and they will continue to cool down. How about low 70s by the time kickoff happens around 7:15? And then as you're heading home, that's when you're going to start to get into that sweater and that hoodie weather. Temperatures down into the mid 60s, but still some mostly clear skies. won't have to worry about anything in the way of rain. If we did have anything in the way of rain, I would imagine that the roof would stay closed, but it should be a very fun night up at Mercedes-Benz Stadium, or maybe just back here where you're having a watch party, maybe cooking out with friends and family. Your Grillcast green spatulas for tonight if you have any plans to watch Monday Night Football. Now over the next 3 days, still keeping the chilly mornings in the forecast. 53 and 56 for lows on Tuesday and Wednesday morning. Afternoon highs still slightly above average, somewhere in these low 80s, 83 for a high tomorrow, and then 82 as we go into Wednesday. Mostly sunny skies, maybe a few clouds here and there, but nothing in the way of rain chances. And we'll go ahead and take a look at the entire work week. It doesn't look like we're getting rid of these cool mornings whatsoever. So you're definitely going to want to make plans to have that light jacket, maybe that you wore this morning, to keep it handy for the morning commute time. And then as you go into the afternoons, temperatures will be a lot warmer. You can feel free to shed those layers, I'm sure, but somewhere around average, maybe slightly above average or slightly below average. These morning low temperatures will continue to start out in the 50s each of the next 5 days for every single day of the new work week. Afternoon highs don't waver much, maybe a slight decrease as we go into Thursday and into Friday. And the reasoning for this is actually going to be the first of two frontal boundaries that we'll talk about. This frontal boundary not going to send us anything in the way of rain. It may give us a bit of an increase in cloud cover, but it's also going to really reinforce the dry air that we have in our forecast. So you will see that we're going to hover in the comfortable range, maybe slightly into the humid box, but that's only a couple of dew point temperatures to get somewhere in the lower half of the 60s. I do believe we'll just continue to see those areas of no color and some faint areas of light green just fluctuate over the next couple of days. But then Thursday into Friday, we get another downtick, that reinforcing push of drier air. That's going to be a frontal boundary, giving us another bit of a wedge setup. So that northeasterly breeze kind of wedging up against the Appalachian Mountains and funneling in those cooler surface dew points. But we will start to see a pretty quick warm up in terms of those numbers as we go throughout Friday, Saturday, and Sunday. Friday, your humidity should be at the lowest. Saturday, it should still remain in that comfortable range. But I think Sunday, that point is going to be a little bit higher than what we're forecasting as of right now, because we are going to have frontal boundary number 2 move through. So you're not going to get an indication of this first frontal boundary. Take a look at what happens between Thursday and Friday. Yes, maybe some cloud cover passing just to the north of us in our northernmost counties here in central Georgia, but the frontal boundary is actually going to more so come from the north and the northeasterly direction. But it is going to reinforce that northeasterly breeze, bring us some drier air in the forecast before we go into Saturday afternoon. And there's frontal boundary number 2, sending its fair share of widespread rain to areas to the west and northwest of us throughout the day on Saturday. But back here at home, it still looks like Saturday is going to be a great day along with Friday in terms of having no rain chances and some comfortable feeling air. And then once we get into Sunday, things get a bit iffy. You're seeing not much model agreement whatsoever. Right now, you can see that both models are at least hinting at widespread rain trying to move towards central Georgia. But it's all going to be dependent on the timing of this frontal boundary. So obviously, typically, when you have your warmer temperatures, that's when you have your better rain chances ahead of a frontal boundary. So this front needs to come through during those daylight hours on Sunday. This is 8 a.m. right here, and the GFS is hinting at a passage across central Georgia. But the European is trailing just behind it a little bit later. And if this scenario plays out, we'd only be looking at a few spotty to maybe even scattered showers in the forecast. But if we go the GFS route in the area in green, that's going to result in more widespread rain chances. And obviously not the most conducive if you do have any plans that are going to be outdoors, maybe going to the pumpkin patch or doing something with your family, enjoying all that fall fun. But we desperately need the rain at this point. I was talking about that drought monitor earlier. It may come in the form of some widespread showers, maybe even a few thunderstorms, but that would be a welcome trade-off. If we could just have one messy and dreary day that gives us our rainfall totals that we need, then hopefully we can go into another dry stretch as we kick off the beginning of next week. But we're still trying to fine-tune the exact timing of this frontal boundary. And once we get a better idea of that timing, then that, of course, will give us a better idea about how much rain that we are expecting. But the consensus is that frontal boundary will pass through fairly quickly. And what are we left with as we go into the beginning of next week? It looks like more drier air that is continuing to dominate the forecast and keep things very quiet. So as of early this morning, we did get another tropical storm named out in the Atlantic. has been quite an active last month or two, I would say, in the tropics. Very thankfully, most of those have been fish storms. They've just stayed out in the Atlantic Ocean. They haven't really had any impacts here in the United States. Well, welcome Tropical Storm Lorenzo, yet another fish storm, and really this one more so than the others. We've seen some of our recent storms maybe clip portions of the Caribbean, go up towards Bermuda, having some minimal impacts in some of those islands just to the east and southeast of us. Well, Lorenzo sits right smack dab in the middle of the Atlantic Ocean right now and is expected to continue up to the northwest. That's where it's currently moving at 16 miles per hour. And it will continue to curve back out into the middle of the Atlantic Ocean. Now, if it holds together past this, it could have some impacts, say, over here in these islands just off the coast of Morocco, getting close to Azores right here, which is just to the north of where you do see this cone forecast. Lorenzo is only forecasted to stay a tropical storm. So it is a named storm, but it doesn't look like it's going to strengthen to say maybe into hurricane status, but it's getting very close. 70-mile-per-hour winds. That's only 4 miles per hour off of Category 1 hurricane status. And that's going to be very important in terms of what our named storms and how many hurricanes we've received and how we compare to average for this time of year. But nothing to worry about with Lorenzo. You probably will hear it mentioned a good bit on news networks, maybe here on 13 WMAZ, but still, this is simply just going to be a fish storm, not impact any land masses until it maybe takes that curve back over to Northwest Africa, portions of Southwest Europe. But we'll continue to monitor that and let you know if that is going to happen. So 2025 hurricane names. We are now crossing off the L names. So we have 7 named storms over here on the first column. We have been through 5 of them here in the second column, making for a grand total of 12 named storms. But crossing off Lorenzo now, if we have another area to watch in terms of potential development, the next name to claim would be Melissa, the M-named storm. And we're actually running a bit behind last year's hurricane season because the end of last week was the anniversary of Hurricane Milton, the M-named storm of last year's hurricane season. So we haven't even claimed our M-name as of right now. Still continuing to look like it is going to round up to be a below average season, but we still have about a month and a half left of hurricane season. So there is the possibility of all these names getting checked off over the next month and a half, even though the frequency of these storms will go down. So in terms of the numbers, taking a look at average, on average we typically see 14 named storms, 7 of which, so half of those named storms are typically hurricanes, and then 3 of those are typically Category 3 or higher hurricanes. So Colorado State, what they forecasted for us, 17 named storms, 9 hurricanes, and 4 major hurricanes. Well, now we put this number up to 12 as Lorenzo did form this morning. Still pretty close to average, but 5 named storms off of what was forecasted by Colorado State. We've only seen 4, so only 1/3 of the storms that have formed have become hurricanes. So that's not necessarily a bad thing whatsoever, but still well shy of average and well shy of the 9 that Colorado State predicted. The most shocking thing has been that we've had 3 major hurricanes, believe it or not. You probably just haven't really realized it because many of them have stayed out at sea. Hasn't really been much of a concern for any impacts to land masses. And I know this does say as of October 10th, but this is as of this morning. Just forgot to update the date on this graphic. But 3 major hurricanes. So we are already at average for what we see in terms of major hurricanes in a typical hurricane season. 2 of the 3 hurricanes that did become major hurricanes, that would be Hurricane Erin, Gabrielle, and Umberto. Umberto and Erin both reached Category 5 status, and very thankfully they didn't reach Category 5 status when they got really close to us here in central Georgia. They really just stirred up things out in the Atlantic Ocean, maybe had some impacts on the East Coast with increased surf, maybe some riptide warnings, and over towards Bermuda. Not of a concern down in the south and the southeast. So we'll continue to see if we add any more to these numbers, but typically after you get through this week, tropical activity really slows down. So I don't expect too many more named storms. I would expect maybe our named storms to at least go above average, maybe around 15 or 16, but I don't think that we'll hit that named storm forecast that Colorado State did give us, and I definitely don't think that we'll hit anything in the way of hurricanes, but there is still the potential. All we need is one more major hurricane to hit average to hit what Colorado State forecasted for us, as we are already sitting at average for what we see in a typical season. So here's your 7-day forecast. It is pretty boring, and it's probably going to be a good stretch of weather where you're not checking your app. Maybe the only time you're checking your app is just to see what the temperature is as you walk out the door, because we're still forecasting plenty of low to mid 50s as you walk outside, definitely giving you that chilly feeling and some light jacket weather as you walk outside. But be prepared to shed those layers as you go into the afternoon, where we have some slightly warm temperatures. It may be a little bit warm for your liking. You never like to see 80s as we go into the month of October. You would probably prefer some upper 70s or some mid 70s like myself. But if it's too warm for you, we are going to compensate pretty well with that chilly feeling in the air as we wake up and head outside each and every morning. As we go into Friday, that invisible front will pass through Thursday into Friday. It's going to reinforce that drier air and maybe knock the numbers down just a tad. Morning lows back into the low 50s, afternoon highs closer to the 80-degree mark. And then as we roll into the weekend, trying to briefly warm up, but as of right now, Sunday, I still have a 20% chance of rain. Now, it did look pretty widespread on those long-range models, but it's all going to be dependent on the timing. Like I said, if that front does come through, say, later in the day when our temperatures are getting cooler, then that's not going to result as much widespread rain in the form of showers, maybe even some thunderstorms. But if it comes through during that prime daylight time period, then of course the rain chances would have more coverage. So we need to see some more model agreement before we give that an uptick to those rain chances on Sunday. But right now, I would plan for that last day of the weekend to be a bit messy and at least a little bit dreary. We're actually just going to keep our fingers crossed that hopefully we do get some widespread rain and maybe even a couple of thunderstorms, because we desperately do need some impressive rainfall totals to get out of those dry and drought conditions that have continued to settle in and are very likely to get worse once we get another update on Thursday, since we haven't had too much rain besides a select few areas that got lucky with maybe an inch or two of rain over the course of the last 5 days. So that's how your extended forecast does stand as of right now, and it does look like we're going to kick off the work week next week the exact same way we are today, with some mostly sunny skies and hopefully some cooler temperatures. Let's knock these numbers down into the 70s for a good bit and give you some fall feeling air, and maybe even seeing some more upper 40s as we begin the work week next week. But that's still about a week out into the future. Only thing you need to focus on is nothing interrupting any afternoon or evening plans over the course of this work week and for the beginning of the weekend on Friday and Saturday. Looks like it's going to be another amazing football Friday night forecast. So a lot to look forward to, and I would definitely advise making any plans this weekend on Friday and Saturday before Sunday could be quite messy. So that'll do it for your extended forecast this Monday, and we will see you back here at 11 a.m. tomorrow for another update.